The envelope trembled in my hands, its edges cutting into my skin like guilt made solid. My breath hitched as I stared at Mom's familiar handwriting scrawled across the front. To Lila. The air felt heavy, pressing down on me as if the walls of my tiny apartment were closing in. I slid my finger under the flap, heart pounding so hard it drowned out the hum of the refrigerator. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a legal document declaring me the sole owner of Hart Holdings. My phone buzzed violently on the counter, making me jump. It was Claire. "You knew about this," she hissed before I could even say hello. Her voice sliced through me sharper than any knife ever could. My throat tightened. I couldn't breathe. "Lila, answer me," she demanded, her tone laced with betrayal and rage. Panic surged through my veins, hot and suffocating. How had she found out? What was I supposed to say? I sank onto the couch, clutching the document like it might burn me. Outside, cars honked and people laughed, oblivious to the storm raging inside me. This wasn't just about ownership. It was about family, trust, and everything I thought I understood about who we were. If you want to know how far I went to save what mattered most, subscribe now. You won't believe where this story goes. Next, let me tell you about us, me and Claire. We're not just sisters. We're two halves of a whole that's been cracking apart for years, piece by fragile piece. I'm Lila Hart, 32, the quieter one, always caught between wanting to fix things and fearing I'll only make them worse. People say I'm thoughtful, maybe even kind. But what they don't see is how much I hold back. The words unsaid, the truths buried deep, because speaking up feels like lighting a match in a room full of gasoline. Claire's different. She's 5 years older, all sharp edges and fierce protectiveness, especially when it comes to her kids. Ethan, who's 8, and Lily, 6. They're her world. Her reason for getting out of bed every morning after Dad died and left her scrambling to keep everything together. Where I retreat, she charges ahead, head first into whatever life throws at her. But there's softness too, hidden beneath the armor. When she tucks Ethan and Lily into bed, or laughs over pancakes on lazy Sunday mornings, you can almost forget how hard she fights to keep it all from falling apart. Mom used to joke that Claire was the doer, and I was the dreamer. She wasn't wrong. Growing up, Claire took care of things, helping Mom with dinner, balancing checkbooks way before either of us should have had to think about money. Me? I stayed in my room, nose buried in books, imagining lives where families didn't unravel so easily. That difference shaped us. It pulled us closer sometimes, pushed us apart others. When Mom passed last spring, something inside both of us broke wide open. For Claire, it was losing the person who held our family together. For me, it was realizing I'd spent so long avoiding conflict that I didn't know how to step up anymore. And now this, Hart Holdings. A company neither of us asked for but couldn't ignore. It wasn't just assets on paper. It represented everything Mom cared about. Jobs for the people of Willow Creek, programs that helped struggling families, a legacy built brick by brick. That's why Claire reacted the way she did when she found out. To her, it wasn't fair. Why would Mom leave something so huge to me, a woman who barely spoke above a whisper, and not her, who carried the weight of everything else without complaint? Her anger wasn't just about ownership, it was fear. Fear of losing control, of failing the ones she loved most. And me? My silence wasn't indifference, it was paralysis. I wanted to explain, to bridge the gap between us, but every time I tried, the words stuck in my throat like thorns. What connects us isn't blood, it's love. Complicated, messy, imperfect love. Love that makes you fight dirty and forgive too quickly. Love that drives you to tear each other down one moment and then wonder how to build something stronger the next. If you've ever felt torn between loyalty and truth, Between doing what's right and protecting the people you care about most, you'll understand exactly what's at stake here. This isn't just my story. It's ours. Willow Creek smells like secrets kept too long, earthy, damp, alive. The air carries the faint sweetness of wildflowers blooming along the creek's edge, mingling with the sharp tang of pine needles, crushed underfoot. It's the kind of place where time feels slower, where mornings stretch golden and afternoons hum with cicadas hiding in the trees. But for me, it's never been just a town. It's a memory wrapped in sensation. The cabin sits on the edge of everything, perched between the forest and the water like it's guarding something sacred. Its wooden walls are grayed from years of weathering storms. But inside, sunlight filters through warped glass windows, casting shadows that look like ghosts dancing across the creaky floorboards. Every step you take groans beneath your weight, as if the house itself is reminding you of its age, and maybe yours too. In the kitchen, the scent of cinnamon still lingers faintly, a relic of Mom's baking sprees. She'd stand at the counter rolling out pie crusts, flour dusting her hands and the hem of her apron, while Claire and I argued over who got to lick the spoon. The table where we ate those pies is scarred now, its surface nicked by countless meals and late-night talks. I can almost hear the clink of coffee mugs against its worn wood, see the steam curling up into the cool morning air. Outside, the creek babbles endlessly, its voice low and steady, like an old friend whispering stories. Moss clings to rocks, slick, with spray, and dragonflies dart above the surface, their wings catching the light like shards of stained glass. On summer evenings, fireflies blink in the tall grass. Tiny stars come down to earth. Even now, standing there with the weight of the world pressing down on me, I can't help but feel small in the best way, like all my problems could dissolve into the rustle of leaves or the rush of water over stone. It's strange how places hold memories, isn't it? How the smell of pine can remind you of laughter, or the sound of running water can bring back tears you thought you'd forgotten. Willow Creek isn't just where this story happens. It's part of who we are. The cabin, the creek, even the cracked sidewalks leading into town, they're stitched into our lives, holding us together when nothing else will. If you've ever felt anchored by a place, you'll understand why losing it would mean losing myself. You ever feel like life gives you a choice that's not really a choice at all? Like no matter what you do, someone gets hurt, including you? That's where I am right now, standing in the middle of this mess with my hands full of documents I didn't ask for and a sister who won't look me in the eye anymore. Heart holdings. It sounds so official, doesn't it? But it's not just some name on paper. It's everything Mom cared about, everything she worked herself to the bone for. And somehow she left it all to me. Me. Not Claire, who carried the family on her shoulders after Dad died. Not Claire, who knows how to fix things when they break. Me, the one who stays quiet, who avoids conflict, who lets other people take charge because speaking up feels like setting fire to everything I love. The problem isn't just the company, though. It's what it represents. The business is tied to Willow Creek in ways most people don't even realize. Jobs for families who've lived here for generations. Programs that keep kids off the streets. Community events that bring everyone together around bonfires and barbecues. Mom built it into something bigger than herself, something alive. And now it's slipping through our fingers because of debt and bad decisions made before either of us had a say. If I sell or let the bank foreclose, it's gone. Gone forever. And if I fight to save it, I risk losing Claire completely. Because here's the thing. She doesn't trust me anymore. How could she? When she found out about the will, her face went pale, then red-hot angry. How could Mom do this? She demanded, pacing the cabin like a caged animal. Why would she leave it all to you and nothing to me? Her voice cracked on the last word, and I wanted to scream back. It wasn't my fault. But instead, I stood there frozen, clutching the document like it might burn me if I let go. What was I supposed to say? That Mom thought I'd be better at running things? That maybe she saw something in me neither of us understood? Or worse, that maybe she didn't think about it at all? Every decision I make tears at something deeper inside. Do I tell Claire the truth? That I didn't want any of this? That I'd trade it all in a heartbeat to have Mom back? Or do I stay silent, hoping she'll come around eventually, but knowing every day we wait makes the rift between us wider? Would you blame her for hating me? For looking at me like I'm the reason everything's falling apart? Because sometimes I blame myself too. And then there's the guilt. Oh God, the guilt. It sits heavy in my chest, making it hard to breathe. Every time I walk past the office building downtown, I see the cracks in the foundation, literal and metaphorical. Every time I hear someone mention layoffs or program cuts, I flinch, like their words are arrows aimed straight at me. What kind of person inherits something this big and does nothing? But what kind of sister fights her own flesh and blood over it? I keep asking myself, what would you do? If you were me, staring down the barrel of a choice that could destroy your family? Or save it, what would you choose? Would you step up, even if it meant risking everything? Or would you stay quiet, hoping someone else would fix it for you? Because honestly, I don't know anymore. All I know is that silence isn't working. Staying small isn't working. Something has to give, and soon, before the weight of it crushes us both. The first real crisis hit me like a freight train, and I wasn't ready, not even close. It started with a letter from the bank, crisp white paper folded neatly inside an envelope that felt heavier than it should have. The words blurred together at first, something about foreclosure deadlines and auction dates, but one sentence jumped off the page like a slap across the face. If no action is taken by Friday, Hart Holdings will be sold to the highest bidder. My stomach dropped, and for a moment I thought I might throw up right there on my kitchen floor. This wasn't some abstract problem anymore. It was immediate, urgent, suffocating, and worse. Claire found out before I could figure out how to tell her. She showed up unannounced later that day, her car screeching to a stop in front of the cabin like she couldn't wait another second to confront me. Her eyes were wild, red-rimmed, and blazing with fury as she stormed inside without knocking. "You knew," she accused, slamming the foreclosure notice onto the table so hard coffee sloshed over the edges of our mugs. "You knew this whole time and didn't say a word." Her voice cracked on the last part, raw emotions spilling out in waves that made me shrink back against the counter. I wanted to defend myself, to explain that I'd only found out yesterday, that I'd been trying to process what it meant before saying anything, but the words tangled in my throat. Instead, I just stood there, frozen, while guilt pooled heavy in my chest. The silence between us stretched thin, brittle enough to shatter. At any second, outside, the wind rattled the windows, and the creek roared louder than usual, its restless current mirroring the chaos inside me. But Claire wasn't done. She paced the room like a caged animal, hands trembling as she raked them through her hair. "Do you have any idea what this means?" she demanded, spinning around to face me. "This isn't just your life. It's mine. It's Ethan's. It's Lily's. Do you know how many people depend on this company? How many families will lose everything if it goes under?" Each question landed like a punch, knocking the air out of me until I couldn't breathe. She wasn't wrong. I did know. But hearing her say it aloud made it feel sharper, more real. Like the weight of all those lives rested squarely on my shoulders, whether I wanted it or not. And then came the worst part. The accusation I couldn't dodge. "Why didn't you fight for it sooner?" she spat, tears streaming down her face now. "Why didn't you try to fix it instead of sitting here doing nothing?" Her words cut deeper than any knife ever could, because they weren't entirely unfair. Yes, I'd hesitated. Yes, I'd let fear hold me back. But what she didn't understand, and maybe never would, is that hesitation wasn't laziness or indifference. It was terror. Terror of failing, of making things worse, of losing her completely. For hours, we yelled and cried and circled each other like two wounded animals backed into a corner. By the end, my voice was hoarse, my head pounding, and every inch of me felt raw, exposed. Claire finally left, slamming the door behind her hard enough to rattle the pictures hanging on the walls. Alone again, I sank onto the couch, staring blankly at the foreclosure notice still lying on the table where she dropped it. Its stark black and white print mocked me, reminding me of everything I'd failed to do. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I lay awake listening to the creek outside, its endless rush echoing the storm raging inside me. What scared me most wasn't the deadline or the auction. It was the realization that I couldn't fix this alone. Saving Heart Holdings meant facing Claire, bridging the chasm between us, and somehow convincing her to trust me again. But how? When had either of us ever been good at forgiveness? The next morning, I drove downtown to the office building, hoping to find answers, or at least clarity. The sight of it gutted me. Broken glass littered the sidewalk, graffiti sprayed across the walls in angry red letters. Someone had vandalized it overnight, leaving behind a message that chilled me to the bone. Betrayal has consequences. Who would do this? And why? As I stood there staring at the damage, dread coiled tight in my stomach. This wasn't just about money or ownership anymore. It was personal. Someone wanted to destroy us. Walking away felt impossible, but staying felt futile. Every step forward seemed to lead deeper into quicksand, pulling me under faster than I could claw my way out. If you've ever faced a problem so big it felt insurmountable, you'll understand why I almost gave up right then. Almost. Because somewhere deep down, buried beneath layers of fear and doubt, a tiny spark of defiance flickered to life. Maybe I couldn't save everything. Maybe I couldn't fix everyone. But damn it, I had to try. For Mom, for Willow Creek, for Claire, for me. For a moment, just one fleeting, fragile moment, it felt like we might actually be okay. Claire and I met at the old diner downtown, the same place where Mom used to take us after school when she wanted to celebrate something or cheer us up after bad days. The air smelled like syrup and burnt coffee, sticky sweet and familiar, and for the first time in weeks, it felt like breathing didn't hurt quite so much. She sat across from me in the cracked vinyl booth, her hands wrapped tightly around a mug of tea gone cold. Her eyes were still red, but they weren't blazing anymore. Instead, there was this quiet exhaustion, like she'd finally run out of fight. "I've been thinking," she said softly, breaking the silence that had stretched between us since we ordered. Her voice startled me. It wasn't sharp or accusing this time, just tired. "Maybe we can figure this out together." The words hit me like a shockwave, knocking the breath right out of my lungs. Together. She hadn't said that in years, not since Dad died and everything fell apart. My heart surged with hope, even as doubt whispered low in the back of my mind. Can we really? We spent hours hashing out ideas, scribbling notes on napkins until the table looked like a tornado had swept through. Claire talked about restructuring payments, reaching out to local investors, maybe even hosting a fundraiser in Willow Creek. "People care about this town," she insisted, her voice gaining strength with every word. "They'll want to help, if we give them a chance." I nodded along, letting her energy carry me forward, pretending for just a little while that the weight pressing down on us wasn't crushing. For the first time, I let myself believe we might actually pull this off. By the end of the meal, we had a plan, or at least the beginnings of one. Claire hugged me goodbye outside the diner, her arms tight around my shoulders like she was afraid to let go. "We'll fix this," she murmured into my hair, and I clung to those words like a lifeline. As I watched her drive away, the sun dipping low behind the trees, I almost convinced myself that everything would work out. Almost. But then came the niggle, the tiny seed of unease that refused to stay buried no matter how hard I tried to ignore it. It started when I got home and found an email waiting for me, flagged urgent. At first glance, it seemed harmless enough. A message from the bank confirming receipt of our request for an extension on the foreclosure deadline. Relief washed over me briefly. That was one less thing to worry about, right? But as I scrolled further, something caught my eye. A name tucked away in the fine print, small but unmistakable. Richard Hart. Uncle Richard. Uncle Richard, who hadn't spoken to any of us in years. Uncle Richard, who always showed up when things went wrong, and somehow made them worse. Why was his name attached to the account? What did he have to do with any of this? My stomach churned as I stared at the screen, dread pooling heavy in my chest. He couldn't possibly know about the vandalism, could he? Or about the auction? Was it possible he'd been involved somehow, pulling strings we didn't even realize existed? The questions swirled faster than I could answer them, each one darker than the last. I told myself it was nothing, probably just some administrative oversight, a relic from when he worked with Mom decades ago. But deep down, I knew better. Uncle Richard didn't do nothing. Everything he touched turned sour, poisoned by secrets and lies that lingered long after he walked away. Still, I shoved the thought aside, focusing instead on the plan Claire and I had made. We were moving forward. We were fixing things. That's what mattered, right? Except, what if we weren't seeing the whole picture? What if someone, or something, was waiting in the shadows, ready to tear it all apart again? You ever feel like you're standing on solid ground, only to realize too late that it's quicksand? That's where I was now, clinging to hope while the world beneath me shifted dangerously. And yet, despite the suspicion gnawing at the edges of my mind, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were running out of time. Whatever storm was brewing, it was closer than we thought. The question wasn't whether it would hit, it was whether we'd survive it when it did. The calm didn't last long, how could it? Just when I thought we were gaining ground, the second crisis hit like a sledgehammer to the chest. It started with a phone call from Claire late one night, her voice trembling in a way that made my blood run cold before she even said a word. "Lila," she whispered, and just hearing my name spoken like that, the fragile edge of panic in her tone was enough to send me scrambling out of bed, heart already racing. Something's wrong. By the time I got to her house, lights blazed through every window, spilling into the quiet darkness of Willow Creek like a beacon screaming for help. Claire stood on the porch, arms crossed tightly over her chest as if trying to hold herself together. Ethan and Lily were inside, asleep, or at least pretending to be, but their presence hung heavy in the air, innocent lives caught in the crossfire of something none of us fully understood yet. "It's Uncle Richard," Claire said without preamble, her eyes darting toward the driveway where his car idled ominously. My stomach dropped. Of course it was him. Of course he'd show up now, when everything felt like it was teetering on the edge of collapse. But what came next wasn't just bad. It was catastrophic. He sold the company. Her words landed like a punch, knocking the air out of me. For a moment I couldn't process them. Sold? How? When? The questions tumbled out in a jumble, but Claire just shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "Yesterday," she choked out. "He went behind our backs, signed off on everything. There's nothing left to save." My knees buckled, and I sank onto the steps behind me, staring blankly at the gravel beneath my feet. This couldn't be real. It had to be some kind of nightmare. A cruel twist designed to break us completely. Hart Holdings wasn't just a business. It was Mom's legacy, the foundation of this town, the glue holding so many people together. And now, gone. Just like that. Claire paced back and forth, her movements jerky and frantic. I tried to stop him, she said, her voice rising with desperation. I called him as soon as I saw the paperwork, but he wouldn't listen. He just laughed, Lila. Laughed. She stopped abruptly, turning to face me, her expression raw with anger and betrayal. He said it was for the best. Can you believe that? As if selling everything Mom built somehow honors her memory. The bitterness in her voice cut deeper than any accusation ever could, because part of me wondered if she blamed me too, if she thought I should have seen this coming, should have done more to protect what was ours. Maybe she was right. Maybe I'd been too focused on patching things up between us to notice the cracks widening elsewhere. Either way, the damage was done, and there was no undoing it. We spent hours talking, or arguing, really, about what to do next. Claire wanted to fight, to take legal action against Uncle Richard and whoever bought the company. We can't let him get away with this, she insisted, pacing the length of her living room like a caged animal. This is our family, our home. But every suggestion she threw out felt hollow, impossible. Who would we sue? Where would we even start? And how could we possibly win against someone who'd clearly planned this for months? For my part, I didn't know what to say. Every idea felt like grasping at straws, flimsy and doomed from the start. Maybe we need to talk to him, I ventured finally, though the words tasted bitter in my mouth. Try to reason with him, make him understand. I trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Even saying it aloud felt naive, like believing in fairy tales when reality kept slapping you awake. Claire spun around, glaring at me like I'd betrayed her all over again. Reason with him? She spat. Are you serious? That man doesn't care about reason or family or anything except himself. Why can't you see that? Her anger stung, but worse was the truth buried beneath it. She was right. Uncle Richard didn't care. He never had. And now, because of him, everything we'd worked for was slipping through our fingers faster than we could grab hold. That night, lying awake in the guest room while Claire cried quietly down the hall, I stared at the ceiling and let the weight of it all crush me. What were we supposed to do now? How could we possibly move forward when everything we'd built, and everything Mom had fought for, was gone? If you've ever faced a loss so big it feels like the world itself has shifted, you'll understand why hope felt impossibly far away. Yet somewhere deep down, I knew giving up wasn't an option. Not yet. Because if we did, then Uncle Richard won, and I couldn't let that happen. Not without a fight. The third crisis didn't come at me like a storm. It crept in, slow and insidious, wrapping itself around my chest until it felt like I couldn't breathe. It wasn't just about Uncle Richard or the company anymore. It was about who I was, what I stood for, and how far I'd go to protect the people I loved. And it all came down to one impossible choice. A moral dilemma that made me question everything I thought I knew about right and wrong. It started with a letter delivered to Claire's house early one morning, its envelope thick and official-looking, bearing the logo of the law firm representing Hart Holdings' new owner. My hands shook as I opened it, the paper inside crisp and cold, its words slicing through me like shards of glass. The buyer wasn't some faceless corporation or distant investor. It was someone we both knew, someone who had once been family. Aunt Margot. Aunt Margot, who used to bake cookies with us on rainy afternoons and tell stories about Mom when she was young. Aunt Margot, who always seemed kind but distant, like she carried secrets too heavy to share. Now those secrets were spilling out. In black and white print, she'd purchased Hart Holdings from Uncle Richard for pennies on the dollar and planned to dissolve it entirely. Sell off the assets, shut down programs, lay off workers, wipe away decades of Mom's work like it never mattered. When Claire saw the letter, Her reaction was immediate and visceral. "She can't do this!" she screamed, crumpling the page in her fist like she could erase the truth if she destroyed the evidence. "She's family. How could she betray us like this?" Her voice broke on the last word, raw pain tearing through every syllable. I wanted to scream back, to join her in rage, but instead, I just stood there, frozen, clutching the counter so hard my knuckles turned white. Because deep down, I already knew the answer. She could do it because she had done it. Family didn't mean loyalty, not when money was involved. What followed was a whirlwind of phone calls, desperate attempts to reach Aunt Margot before she finalized anything. But she didn't pick up, didn't respond to texts or emails. It was like she'd vanished, leaving behind only silence and devastation. By the time we accepted she wasn't going to talk to us, exhaustion had set in. Heavy and suffocating. Claire collapsed onto the couch, tears streaming silently down her face while Ethan and Lily hovered nearby, unsure what to do, but sensing something was very wrong. And then came the offer, the thing that twisted the knife even deeper. Story. That night, another envelope arrived, slipped under Claire's door without explanation. Inside was a check, made out to me personally, for an amount so staggering it made my head spin. Attached was a note handwritten in Aunt Margot's neat cursive. "Consider this your share. Walk away, Lila. Let me handle the rest." My stomach churned as I stared at it, the weight of the decision pressing down on me like a mountain. What was I supposed to do? Take the money and abandon everything Mom worked for? Or refuse it and risk losing not only the company, but also whatever fragile peace Claire and I had managed to rebuild? Either way, someone got hurt, including me. Claire found me sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the check like it might burn me if I touched it. Her eyes widened when she saw the amount, disbelief giving way to fury. "You're not actually considering this," she said flatly, her voice sharp enough to cut steel. "Tell me you're not." "I don't know what to do," I exploded, slamming my fists against the table so hard the dishes rattled. "What am I supposed to choose, Claire? Betray Mom's legacy or walk away with enough money to start over somewhere else? Do you think I want this? Do you think I asked for any of this?" Her expression softened slightly, but the anger didn't leave her eyes. "This isn't just about you," she shot back. "It's about Willow Creek. About the people who depend on that company. You can't throw them under the bus for some payout. But what if this is our only chance?" I countered, my voice cracking under the strain. "What if taking the money means we can help those people ourselves, start something new, build something better? Isn't that what Mom would have wanted?" Claire recoiled like I'd slapped her, shaking her head slowly. "No," she whispered, her voice trembling. That's not what she would have wanted. She believed in fighting for what matters, not running away when things get hard. Her words hit like a punch to the gut, knocking the wind out of me. She was right. I knew she was. But knowing didn't make the choice any easier. Every instinct screamed at me to take the money, to save myself before everything fell apart completely. But every fiber of my being rebelled against the idea of walking away, of letting Aunt Margot win, of failing Mom. Would you blame me if I took the check? If you were in my shoes, staring down the barrel of a decision that could destroy lives, including your own, what would you do? Would you fight, even if it meant losing everything? Or would you grab hold of the lifeline, no matter how tainted it felt? Because honestly, I don't know anymore. All I know is that silence isn't working. Staying small isn't working. Something has to give, and soon, before the weight of it crushes us both. That night, I sat alone in the dark, the check lying untouched on the table in front of me. Outside, the creek roared louder than usual, its restless current mirroring the chaos inside me. Somewhere deep down, buried beneath layers of fear and doubt, a tiny spark of defiance flickered to life. Maybe I couldn't save everything. Maybe I couldn't fix everyone. But damn it, I had to try. For Mom, for Willow Creek, for Claire, for me. The fourth crisis came like a tidal wave, crashing over me with such force that I thought it might drown me. It wasn't just one thing. It was everything, all at once, piling on top of each other until I couldn't tell where one problem ended and the next began. And this time, there was no running from it, no hiding in the shadows, or pretending it would go away. This was life or death for Willow Creek, for Claire, for me, and maybe even for whatever was left of our family. It started early one morning when I woke up to find Aunt Margot waiting for me outside Claire's house, sitting primly on the porch steps like she hadn't just ripped apart everything we cared about. Her presence hit me like a punch to the gut. Seeing her face to face after what she'd done made my hands shake with rage before I even said a word. "What are you doing here?" I demanded, my voice sharp enough to cut glass. She didn't flinch. Of course she didn't. Instead, she gave me that same calm, measured smile she always wore, like nothing could rattle her. "I came to explain," she said softly, standing up and smoothing her skirt as if this were some casual visit instead of an ambush. "You deserve to hear it from me." "Explain what?" Claire snapped, storming out onto the porch behind me. Her eyes burned with fury, and for a moment, I thought she might lunge at Aunt Margot right then and there. I stepped between them instinctively, though I wasn't sure who I was protecting more, Claire or myself. Aunt Margot sighed, her expression shifting into something almost sad. Almost. "I know you're angry," she began, her tone infuriatingly gentle. "But you need to understand why I did this. Heart Holdings was falling apart. Your mother worked herself to the bone trying to keep it afloat, but the truth is, it was never sustainable. I bought it to save you both from ruin, to give you a way out." "A way out?" Claire echoed, incredulous. "By destroying everything Mom built? By selling off pieces of this town like garbage?" "It's not destruction," Aunt Margot countered, her voice hardening slightly. "It's reinvention. The world changes, girls. You can either adapt or get left behind." Her words landed like a slap, sharp and stinging. But worse than her explanation was the folder she handed me. A thick stack of papers detailing every asset Heart Holdings still owned, every program, slated for closure, every worker marked for termination. Names, faces, lives, people I knew, people Mom had fought for, all reduced to numbers on a page. And at the bottom of the document, written in bold letters, "Final liquidation date, 2 weeks, 2 weeks." That's how much time we had left to stop her. 2 weeks to undo years of damage, to rally a community, to confront someone who clearly believed they were untouchable. The weight of it crushed me, pressing down so hard I thought I might collapse under it. Claire grabbed the folder from my hands, flipping through the pages with trembling fingers. "We can fight this," she whispered fiercely, though her voice wavered. "We have to." But fighting felt impossible. Even if we managed to raise awareness, organize protests, beg the townspeople to stand with us, what difference would it make against someone like Aunt Margot? She had lawyers, resources, connections we couldn't touch. Every move we made felt like throwing pebbles at a tank. And yet, giving up wasn't an option either. Not when failure meant losing Willow Creek forever. That night, sleep refused to come. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation, every argument, every desperate plan we'd tried to piece together. Outside, the wind howled through the trees, rattling the windows like ghosts demanding answers. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked incessantly, its cries echoing the chaos inside me. Everything felt wrong, hopeless, suffocating, unbearable. And then, just as exhaustion finally pulled me toward unconsciousness, my phone buzzed violently, on the nightstand. A text message lit up the screen, sent from an unknown number. "If you want to save Heart Holdings, meet me tomorrow at dawn by the creek. Come alone." My heart stopped. Who was it? What did they know? For a moment, paranoia took hold, whispering that this was a trap, that Uncle Richard or Aunt Margot had sent someone to silence me before I could act. But another part of me clung to the possibility that it wasn't. That maybe, just maybe, help was coming from somewhere unexpected. By sunrise, I stood by the creek, shivering in the damp morning air. Fog rolled across the water, thick and heavy, obscuring everything beyond a few feet. My pulse pounded in my ears, drowning out the sound of the current rushing past. When a figure finally emerged from the mist, I nearly screamed. It was Mrs. Hargrove, an elderly woman who ran the local library and had known Mom since childhood. "You shouldn't be here," she said urgently, glancing over her shoulder, like she feared being followed. "But neither should I. Listen carefully, Lila. If you want to beat Margot, you'll need proof. Documents, evidence of what she's planning, and I know where to find it. Proof." The word sparked a flicker of hope, small but fierce. But chasing it meant risking everything, including trust. Could I believe her? Should I follow her lead, even if it meant walking straight into danger? Or was this exactly what Aunt Margot wanted, luring me into a position where she could finish us off for good? Time was running out. Choices blurred together, each one darker than the last. If you were me, staring down the barrel of a decision that could destroy lives, including your own, what would you do? Would you gamble everything on a stranger's promise? Or would you play it safe, knowing safety might mean surrendering everything you love? Because honestly, I don't know anymore. All I know is that staying silent isn't working. Staying small isn't working. Something has to give, and soon, before the weight of it crushes us both. The final stretch felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, staring down into an abyss, so deep it swallowed light whole. Every step forward carried the weight of everything I'd ever feared and everything I still hoped for, pressing down on me until it was hard to tell whether I was moving toward salvation or destruction. But there was no turning back now. Not when the clock was ticking louder than my own heartbeat. Mrs. Hargrove's words haunted me as I drove to the address she'd scribbled on a scrap of paper. "If you want proof, you'll find it in the basement of Margot's office building. But don't trust anyone, not even yourself." Her voice had been low and urgent, trembling with something between fear and resolve. She hadn't explained how she knew what she did, or why she was risking her neck to help us. But I didn't have time to question her motives. All that mattered was getting inside that building before dawn. The streets of Willow Creek were eerily quiet, the kind of silence that feels alive, watching you from the shadows. Streetlights flickered overhead, casting long, distorted shadows across cracked sidewalks. The air smelled damp, metallic, like rain hanging just out of reach, and every sound seemed amplified. The crunch of gravel under my tires, the distant hum of electricity buzzing through lampposts, my own shallow breathing fogging up the car windows. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, but even that couldn't stop them from shaking. When I pulled up to the office building, its silhouette loomed against the night sky like some forgotten fortress guarding secrets too dangerous to share. It was old, decrepit, exactly the kind of place you'd expect to harbor lies and betrayals. Broken glass littered the steps leading to the entrance, graffiti scrawled across the walls in jagged red letters. "Betrayal has consequences. The B.R." Same message I'd seen weeks ago when the vandalism first started. Coincidence? Or warning? I hesitated at the door, my pulse hammering in my ears. What if this was a trap? What if Aunt Margot already knew I was coming and had sent someone to stop me? But then I thought about Claire. her face pale and drawn, her eyes hollow with exhaustion, and all the people depending on Heart Holdings. If I didn't try, we'd lose everything. And maybe that was exactly what Aunt Margot wanted. For me to give up without a fight. Inside, the building smelled musty, like mildew and dust mingling with decades of forgotten dreams. Faint moonlight filtered through boarded-up windows, creating eerie patterns on the floor that shifted as clouds drifted past outside. Each creak of the floorboards echoed like a gunshot, making me flinch and glance over my shoulder, half expecting someone or something to leap out of the darkness. The basement stairs were narrow and steep, their wooden treads groaning under my weight with every step. At the bottom, a single bulb hung from the ceiling, its dim light swinging slightly as though disturbed by an unseen breeze. Shelves lined the walls, sagging under the weight of boxes labeled with dates stretching back years. This was it, the archive Mrs. Hargrove had mentioned. Somewhere in here had to be the evidence we needed to expose Aunt Margot's plans. But where do you start when you're looking for something you can't name? I rifled through box after box, my fingers trembling as I sifted through papers yellowed with age, financial records, employee rosters, memos signed by Mom. Everything blurred together until my vision swam, tears stinging my eyes. Was this hopeless? Was I chasing ghosts instead of answers? And then I found it. A file marked confidential, asset liquidation plan. My breath caught as I flipped it open, scanning the contents quickly. It was all there. Detailed instructions for dismantling Heart Holdings piece by piece, lists of buyers ready to snap up assets at bargain prices, timelines for layoffs and closures. But most damning of all was a note handwritten in Aunt Margot's unmistakable script. Ensure no trace remains. Clean slate. My heart pounded wildly, adrenaline surging through me like fire. We had her. Finally, we had her. But victory tasted bitter, because I knew the hardest part was still ahead. Confronting Aunt Margot, forcing her to face what she'd done. And not alone. Claire deserved to be there too. She'd fought so hard, sacrificed so much. She needed to see this through to the end. By the time I got back to Claire's house, the sun was beginning to rise, painting the horizon in streaks of orange and pink. She met me at the door, her expression shifting from worry to awe as I handed her the file. "We've got her," I whispered, my voice cracking under the weight of everything unsaid. Tears filled her eyes as she hugged me tightly, neither of us speaking for a long moment. In that silence, I let myself believe, for the first time, that maybe, just maybe, we could win. But would we? Could two sisters take down someone as powerful and calculating as Aunt Margot? Would the truth be enough to turn the tide? Or would she crush us before we even had a chance to speak? If you've ever faced a battle where losing wasn't an option, you'll understand why my stomach churned with equal parts hope and dread. Because the real fight hasn't even begun yet. And trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Stay tuned to see how far Lila will go to save her family and her town. Subscribe now for the jaw-dropping finale. It's going to change everything. The decisive confrontation came faster than I expected, a storm breaking loose in the middle of what should have been an ordinary morning. Claire and I stood side by side outside Aunt Margot's estate, an imposing brick mansion perched on the edge of Willow Creek like it owned the horizon, and every step toward the front door felt heavier than the last. My pulse thundered in my ears, drowning out the chirping birds and rustling leaves that tried to pretend this was just another day. It wasn't. This was everything. We didn't knock. We barged in, fueled by anger and desperation, our voices sharp enough to cut glass. Aunt Margot sat at her dining room table, sipping tea as if she hadn't spent weeks systematically dismantling our lives. Her calm demeanor infuriated me more than anything else, like none of this mattered, like we were inconveniences rather than people. "Took you long enough?" she said coolly when she saw us, setting down her cup with deliberate precision. I was beginning to think you'd given up." "Not a chance," Claire shot back, slamming the file onto the table so hard the china rattled. "You're done lying to us, Margot. Done hiding behind your excuses and your fake smiles. We know what you've been planning." For a moment, Aunt Margot looked genuinely surprised, not because she didn't expect us to find out, but because we dared to confront her. Then her expression shifted into something colder, harder. She leaned, back in her chair, studying us like predators sizing up prey. "And what exactly do you think you're going to do about it?" she asked, her tone dripping with condescension. "File a lawsuit? Rally the townsfolk? You're too late for that, girls. The deals are signed, the contract's finalized. There's nothing left to stop." Her words hit like a punch to the gut, knocking the wind out of me. She was right. We were too late. Or at least we would be if we let her win. But giving up wasn't an option anymore. Not after everything we'd fought for, not after everything Mom had sacrificed. "You don't get to act like this is some business decision," I exploded, my voice shaking with rage. "This isn't just numbers on a page. It's people, families, lives. How can you sit there and pretend none of that matters?" "Aunt." Margot sighed dramatically, feigning patience. "Oh, Lila," she murmured, shaking her head. "Always so sentimental. Your mother made the same mistake, letting emotions cloud her judgment. Look where it got her. That was the final straw." Something inside me snapped, and suddenly all the fear, all the guilt, all the helplessness boiled over into pure fury. "Don't you dare talk about Mom like you knew her," I screamed, slamming my hands on the table. "You don't get to use her name to justify this. She cared about Willow Creek, about the people who depended on Hart Holdings. And you're tearing it all apart because you couldn't stand not being in control." Claire stepped forward then, her voice trembling but fierce. "She's right, Margot. This isn't about saving anyone or fixing anything. This is about power. About proving you're smarter, stronger, better than us. But guess what? You're not. You're just small." For the first time, Aunt Margot faltered. Her mask slipped, revealing the raw, ugly truth beneath. She wasn't untouchable. She was scared. Scared of losing. Scared of being exposed. Scared of facing the wreckage she'd created. But instead of backing down, she doubled down, lashing out with venomous precision. "Fine," she spat. "If you're so determined to play hero, go ahead. Try to stop me, but don't come crying to me when the whole thing collapses around you. Because it will. And when it does, don't say I didn't warn you." Her threat hung heavy in the air, sharp and suffocating. For a moment, doubt crept in, whispering that maybe she was right, that maybe we were fighting a losing battle. But then I looked at Claire, standing tall despite the tears streaming down her face, and remembered why we were here. Not for revenge, not for pride, but for Mom, for Willow Creek, for everyone who deserved better than what Aunt Margot had planned. So we didn't back down. Instead, we called her bluff. We marched straight to the local courthouse, armed with the evidence from the basement and a newfound determination that burned brighter than any fear. By the time we filed the injunction to halt the liquidation process, word had spread through town like wildfire. People showed up. Workers, neighbors, friends, all rallying behind us, demanding justice. Even Mrs. Hargrove appeared, clutching a stack of old photographs showing decades of Hart Holdings' impact on the community. Together, we built a case that wasn't just about money or assets. It was about legacy, love, and the unshakable bonds that held us together. But the battle wasn't over yet. Aunt Margot retaliated with everything she had. Lawyers, threats, smear campaigns designed to paint us as reckless idealists trying to sabotage progress. Every day brought new challenges, new obstacles threatening to derail us completely. Yet, somehow we kept pushing forward, fueled by sheer willpower and the knowledge that failure wasn't an option. Would you have stayed in the fight? Would you have risked everything for a cause that seemed impossible to win? Because honestly, I don't know how we did it either. All I know is that sometimes the hardest battles are worth fighting, even if victory feels impossibly far away. And trust me, what happened next changed everything, for better or worse. Just when we thought we'd finally gained the upper hand, just when it felt like the tide might actually turn in our favor, the unexpected twist hit like a wrecking ball, shattering everything we thought we knew and leaving us reeling. It happened during the hearing at the courthouse, the moment we'd been building toward for weeks. The room buzzed with tension, packed to the brim with townsfolk who had shown up to support us, their faces etched with hope and determination. Aunt Margot sat across from us, flanked by her army of polished lawyers, her expression unreadable, as stone. And then, out of nowhere, the judge called for a recess, and that's when everything changed. I was pacing outside the courtroom, trying to calm my racing heart, when I saw him, Uncle Richard. He stood near the stairwell, talking quietly into his phone. But when he noticed me staring, he hung up abruptly and approached. My stomach churned. Seeing him here now felt like walking into a trap. "What do you want?" I demanded, my voice sharp enough to cut steel. Claire appeared at my side instantly, her protective instincts kicking in. Uncle Richard held up his hands in mock surrender, though there was nothing harmless about the smirk tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Relax, girls," he said smoothly. "I'm not here to cause trouble." "Could have fooled us," Claire snapped, crossing her arms tightly over her chest. "You've done nothing but cause trouble since this whole mess started." He ignored her jab, stepping closer until I could smell the faint trace of cologne clinging to his suit jacket. "Actually," he said, lowering his voice conspiratorially, "I'm here to help." "Help?" I echoed, incredulous. "After everything you've done? After selling Heart Holdings behind our backs?" His grin widened, infuriatingly smug. "Let's just say, things aren't always what they seem." Before I could press him further, he slipped something into my hand, a flash drive, and disappeared, down the hallway before either of us could react. Claire grabbed my wrist, inspecting the object like it might explode. "What is that? What did he give you?" "I don't know," I admitted, my mind racing. But deep down, I already suspected. It wasn't going to be good. Back inside the courtroom, we loaded the files onto a laptop borrowed from one of the attorneys. What we found made my blood run cold. Videos, emails, recordings, all implicating Aunt Margot in illegal activities far beyond Heart Holdings, fraudulent tax filings, bribery schemes, even evidence of embezzlement dating back years. But the most shocking revelation wasn't about her, it was about Mom. Documents revealed that Aunt Margot hadn't just bought the company from Uncle Richard. She'd orchestrated its decline long before Dad died, manipulating finances and siphoning funds to line her own pockets. She'd been poisoning the business slowly, deliberately, ensuring Mom would never succeed no matter how hard she worked. The room spun as the weight of it all crashed down on me. This wasn't just betrayal. It was sabotage. Aunt Margot hadn't waited for Heart Holdings to fail. She'd made sure it would. And worse, Mom must have known, or at least suspected. That's why she left it to me instead of Claire. Not because she thought I was stronger or smarter, but because she wanted me to uncover the truth. When we presented the evidence to the judge, Aunt Margot's composure shattered completely. Her lawyers scrambled to distance themselves, abandoning her mid-hearing as the gravity of the situation sank in. By the end of the day, she was under investigation, not just for Heart Holdings, but for crimes spanning decades. The liquidation process was halted indefinitely, and the company returned to our control. But the victory felt hollow. Too many questions lingered unanswered. Why had Uncle Richard helped us? Was he genuinely remorseful, or was this another game, And what about Mom? How much pain had she carried silently while fighting battles we never understood? If you're wondering how these twists resolve, and whether justice truly prevails, you'll need to stay tuned. Because trust me, the story doesn't end here. Subscribe now to follow Lila's journey through secrets, redemption, and the ultimate test of family loyalty. You won't believe where it goes next. The dust settled slowly, like ash after a fire, thick and heavy, clinging to everything it touched. Aunt Margot's fall from grace left a void that no one knew how to fill, least of all me. For weeks, I wandered through the remnants of Heart Holdings, its hallways echoing with memories I wasn't sure I was ready to face. The company was ours, again. Ours to rebuild, ours to save. But the weight of it felt different now. It wasn't just about preserving Mom's legacy or protecting Willow Creek anymore. It was about understanding who I'd become in the process. Who we'd become. At first, I thought the hardest part would be forgiving Aunt Margot, or at least trying to. But forgiveness wasn't the issue. She didn't deserve it, not really. What she'd done went beyond betrayal. It was destruction, deliberate and calculated. No, the real challenge was forgiving myself. For staying silent when I should have spoken up. For doubting Claire when she needed me most. For letting fear hold me back until there was almost nothing left to fight for. Claire and I spent hours sorting through the wreckage together. Not just of the business, but of our relationship. We argued, we cried, we laughed, sometimes all within the span of 10 minutes. There were days when I wanted to give up, to walk away and leave the mess behind. But then I'd look at her, really look at her, and see the same exhaustion mirrored in her eyes. And somehow that made it easier to keep going. Because as much as this journey had torn us apart, it had also forced us to lean on each other in ways we hadn't in years. Maybe ever. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the creek, casting golden light across the water, Claire and I sat on the porch of the cabin where it all began. The air smelled faintly of pine and wildflowers, sweet and familiar, like coming home. Neither of us spoke for a long time, content to listen to the steady rush of the current and the distant chirping of crickets. Finally, Claire broke the silence. "Do you think Mom knew?" she asked softly, her voice barely audible over the sounds of the night. "About Margot, I mean." I hesitated, tracing the grain of the wooden railing with my fingertips. "I think she suspected," I admitted. "Maybe not everything, but enough to know something was wrong. That's why she left the company to me, to make sure I found out." Claire nodded slowly, tears glistening in her eyes. "She always did trust you more than you trusted yourself." Her words hit like a punch to the gut, knocking the breath out of me. Trust. That was the heart of it, wasn't it? All this time I'd been so afraid of failing, of making things worse, that I hadn't realized the biggest risk wasn't losing. It was never trying at all. Mom believed in me, even when I didn't. And maybe it was time I started believing too. By the time we finished restructuring Heart Holdings, it wasn't the same company Mom had built. It couldn't be, not after everything it had been through. But it was stronger, more resilient, shaped by the lessons we'd learned along the way. We rehired workers Aunt Margot had laid off, reinstated programs she'd dismantled, and created new initiatives designed to support the community in ways Mom could only dream of. Every decision we made felt like a step toward healing, not just for Willow Creek, but for ourselves. And yet, the scars remained. They always would. Some nights, I still woke up drenched in sweat, haunted by the memory of Aunt Margot's smirk, or Uncle Richard's cryptic warning. But those moments didn't control me anymore. They reminded me instead of how far I'd come, and how much farther I still had to go. The final piece of closure came unexpectedly during a quiet afternoon in the library. Mrs. Hargrove pulled me aside, handing me an old photo album filled with pictures of Mom from before Dad died. In one of them, she stood in front of Hart Holdings, original office building, smiling brighter than I'd ever seen. On the back, scrawled in her handwriting, were 3 words: "Never stop fighting." I carried those words with me everywhere, letting them anchor me when doubt crept in. Because if Mom could fight for her family, for her town, for her dreams, then so could I. So could Claire. So could anyone willing to stand up and say, "Enough." Looking back now, I can see how much has changed, not just in Willow Creek, but in me. I'm not the same person who opened that envelope months ago, trembling with guilt and fear. I'm braver, stronger, more willing to take risks, even when they scare me. And while I'll never forget the pain of what happened, I've learned to carry it differently, as a reminder of what's possible when you refuse to give up. If you've ever faced a moment that forced you to confront your deepest fears, your biggest doubts, I want to ask you this. What did you learn about yourself in the process? How did you grow? Because transformation isn't just about surviving. It's about becoming someone capable of thriving, no matter what comes next. The main conflict ended not with a bang, but with a quiet exhale, like the first breath after holding it for too long. Hart Holdings was safe, or as safe as anything could be after surviving what we'd just been through. The legal battles were over, Aunt Margot's schemes exposed, and Uncle Richard's cryptic involvement had faded into the background, unanswered but no longer relevant. What mattered now wasn't the courtroom drama or the scandals. It was the people who remained standing when the dust settled. It was Willow Creek itself, breathing again after being strangled by greed and betrayal. Claire and I stood together on the steps of the newly reopened office building, watching as employees trickled back inside, their faces lighting up with cautious hope. Some hugged us tightly, tears streaming down their cheeks as they thanked us for saving their jobs, their livelihoods. Others simply nodded, their gratitude unspoken but palpable in the way they lingered, unwilling to leave until they were sure this wasn't another dream about to shatter. For the first time in months, the air felt lighter, freer, as if the weight that had pressed down on all of us had finally lifted. Inside, the space buzzed with energy, a sharp contrast to the hollow emptiness it had become under Aunt Margot's control. We'd spent weeks renovating, repainting walls that had grown dingy with neglect, replacing broken furniture, hanging new photos of community events and smiling faces. Every detail was deliberate, a reminder that this place belonged to everyone, not just one person. At the center of the lobby hung a plaque engraved with Mom's name and 3 simple words she'd written years ago. Together, we thrive. When Claire unveiled it during the reopening ceremony, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. But the real resolution wasn't in the building or the programs, or even the renewed sense of purpose among the workers. It was in us, in me and Claire, and the fragile yet unbreakable bond we'd rebuilt brick by painful brick. After everything, we weren't just sisters anymore. We were partners, allies, co-conspirators in the fight to keep Mom's legacy alive. Sitting across from each other at the conference table later that evening, exhausted but triumphant, I realized something profound. We hadn't saved Hart Holdings alone. Together, we'd saved each other. Claire leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples like she always did when she was overwhelmed. "Can you believe it?" she murmured, half laughing, half crying. "We actually pulled it off." I shook my head, still unable to fully process it myself. "Honestly, no. But here we are," she smiled faintly, her eyes softening as she studied me. "You know, Lila, I don't think Mom left the company to you because she thought you were stronger than me. She left it to you because she knew you needed this, needed to prove, to yourself, that you could do it." Her words hit me like sunlight breaking through. Clouds warming places I hadn't realized were cold. Maybe she was right. Maybe this whole ordeal had been less about saving heart holdings and more about finding pieces of myself I'd lost along the way. Confidence. Courage. A voice that refused to stay silent, even when speaking up felt impossible. Those things weren't gifts Mom gave me. They were challenges, ones I'd risen to meet despite every instinct telling me to run. The next morning I went to the creek, needing a moment of solitude before diving back into the chaos of running a business. The water rushed past me, steady and relentless, its rhythm soothing in a way nothing else could be. I knelt by the edge, trailing my fingers through the icy current, and let myself feel the enormity of what we'd accomplished. Not perfection. Never. That, but survival. Growth. Redemption. When Claire joined me a few minutes later, carrying 2 steaming mugs of coffee, she didn't say anything at first. She just sat beside me, passing one mug into my hands and letting the silence stretch between us like an old friend. Finally, she spoke. "Do you think we'll ever stop feeling guilty about all the mistakes we made?" I sipped my coffee, considering the question. "Maybe," I said slowly. "Or maybe guilt isn't the point. Maybe it's about learning how to carry it without letting it crush us." She nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Sounds like something," Mom would say, and she was right. It did. Because somewhere along the way, I'd started channeling Mom not just in actions but in mindset. Her resilience, her determination, her belief that love could overcome even the hardest obstacles. It was all part of me now, woven into the fabric of who I'd become. If you've ever wondered whether it's possible to rebuild something that feels completely broken, let this story remind you. It is. Not perfectly, not easily, but piece by piece, step by step, you can create something stronger than what came before. And sometimes, the greatest victories aren't about fixing what's outside. They're about healing what's within. Life didn't go back to normal after everything. How could it? Normal was gone, replaced by something messier, harder, but also richer. Claire and I weren't the same people who'd started this journey, and neither was Willow Creek. The scars were still there, etched deep into the town and into us, but they'd begun to heal in ways I never thought possible. Not perfectly, not overnight, but enough to remind me that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means finding a way to move forward anyway. Claire changed the most. Or maybe I just saw her differently now. Before all this, she'd been the rock, the one who held everything together while I floated along on the sidelines. But watching her these past few months taught me how much of that strength had been an act, a mask she wore because someone had to. Losing heart holdings, fighting Aunt Margot, it broke her open in ways neither of us expected. She cried more often, let herself be vulnerable in front of me for the first time since we were kids. And yet, she was stronger too, braver than I ever gave her credit for. She stopped trying to fix everything alone and started trusting me to share the load. "You're not as useless as I thought," she joked one evening as we sat on her porch, sipping tea and watching Ethan and Lily chase fireflies in the yard. Her tone was teasing, but her smile said what she couldn't. "Thank you." Wow. Coming from you, that's practically a marriage proposal. I shot back, laughing until my sides hurt. It felt good to laugh again, to feel light, even if only for a moment. But it wasn't just Claire who'd grown. I barely recognized myself some days. The quiet, indecisive version of me who'd spent years avoiding conflict felt like a stranger now. I spoke up when things needed saying, stood firm when others pushed back, and refused to let fear dictate my choices. Running heart holdings alongside, Claire forced me to step into roles I'd always doubted I could handle. Negotiating deals, leading meetings, making decisions that affected hundreds of lives. Some days, it terrified me. Other days, it felt like finally waking up. Even our relationship with Uncle Richard shifted, though not entirely. After handing over the flash drive, he disappeared again, leaving behind only a cryptic note. Sometimes, the hardest truths set us free. Part of me wanted to track him down, demand answers about why he'd helped us, but another part knew better. He wasn't a hero. He was just complicated, like everyone else. Still, his involvement lingered in the background, a reminder that redemption isn't always clean or straightforward. Sometimes it's messy and partial, driven by motives we'll never fully understand. As for Aunt Margot, her absence left a void no one missed. Her arrest sent shockwaves through Willow Creek, exposing secrets people hadn't realized they'd been keeping. Old grievances surfaced, alliances shifted, and for a while, it felt like the entire town was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. But slowly, life moved on. People forgave, not because they forgot, but because forgiving allowed them to keep living. Watching that process unfold reminded me of something Mom used to say. Holding on to hate is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. The biggest change, though, was in how Claire and I worked together. We argued less, listened more, and learned to appreciate each other's strengths instead of focusing on weaknesses. Where she excelled at strategy and big-picture thinking, I thrived in details and relationships. Together we balanced each other out, creating something neither of us could have built alone. Even Ethan and Lily noticed, their wide-eyed curiosity, turning into pride whenever they heard neighbors talking about the Hart sisters saving the town. One afternoon, as we walked along the creek where so many pivotal moments had unfolded, Claire stopped suddenly, turning to face me. "Do you think Mom would be proud?" she asked softly, her voice trembling slightly. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I looked around, at the trees swaying gently in the breeze, the sunlight dancing across the water, the faint hum of cicadas filling the air. Finally, I nodded. "Yeah," I said. "She'd be proud of us, of what we've done, and who we've become." And I meant it, because despite everything, the pain, the betrayal, the endless uncertainty, we'd come out stronger. Not perfect, not invincible, but whole in ways that mattered. If you've ever faced a challenge so big it felt insurmountable, ask yourself this: what did you discover about yourself in the process? How did you grow? Because sometimes the greatest transformations happen not in spite of adversity, but because of it. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that life doesn't hand you answers wrapped in neat little packages. It throws questions at you, big, messy, impossible ones, and leaves you to figure out the rest on your own. And maybe that's the point. Growth doesn't happen when things are easy. It happens when they're hard, when you're forced to dig deep, to face parts of yourself you'd rather ignore, and to make choices that feel like stepping off a cliff without knowing if there's ground below. One of the biggest lessons I took away from everything was how much power lies in vulnerability. For so long, I thought being strong meant staying silent, swallowing my fears and doubts because speaking up felt selfish or dangerous. But what I realized, what Claire and I both realized, is that silence isn't strength, it's stagnation. Real courage comes from showing up anyway, even when your voice shakes, even when failure feels inevitable. Because sometimes just saying the words out loud changes everything, not just for you, but for everyone listening too. That lesson played out over and over again during those months. Every time we stood in front of the townspeople, explaining what had happened and asking for their trust, I saw it in their faces. Fear, skepticism, hope. They didn't have to believe us. They could have walked away, written Hart Holdings off as another lost cause. But they stayed. Not because of anything we said, necessarily, but because we showed them we were willing to fight alongside them, not above them. Vulnerability creates connection, and connection builds community. That's something Mom understood instinctively, and something I'll carry with me forever. Another truth hit me harder than I expected. Forgiveness isn't about excusing bad behavior. It's about freeing yourself from its grip. Aunt Margot hurt us in ways I'll never fully recover from, and part of me will always resent her for it. But holding on to that anger, letting it fester inside me like poison, that would have destroyed me far more effectively than she ever could. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing to move forward despite the pain. It means deciding that someone else's actions won't define your future. Then there's the idea of legacy, not the kind made of buildings or bank accounts, but the kind built on love, sacrifice, and resilience. Mom didn't leave Heart Holdings to Claire or me because she wanted us to run a business. She left it to us because she believed we could honor what it represented. She trusted us to protect the people who depended on it, to keep fighting even when the odds seemed insurmountable. Legacy isn't static. It's alive, evolving with every choice we make. What we do with it matters more than where it came from. And finally, perhaps the most surprising lesson of all, family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by commitment. Claire and I aren't close because we share DNA. We're close because we chose to be, even when it was painful, even when it felt impossible. Family is the person who shows up when you need them most, who fights beside you instead of against you, who reminds you that you're not alone. If you can find that, even in the unlikeliest places, you're richer than you realize. Looking back now, I see how much has changed, not just in Willow Creek, but in me. I'm braver, stronger, more willing to take risks, even when they scare me. And while I'll never forget the pain of what happened, I've learned to carry it differently, as a reminder of what's possible when you refuse to give up. If you've ever faced a moment that forced you to confront your deepest fears or reevaluate what truly matters, I want to ask you this. Who or what helped you get through it? How did you find the strength to keep going when everything felt hopeless? Share your story in the comments. I promise, someone out there needs to hear it. Because the truth is, none of us are alone in this. We're all figuring it out as we go, one step at a time.